Welcome back to another episode of the Bulldog Blitz. We got a packed episode for y'all today as we'll recap the second round of the IHSA playoffs as the high school football season starts to come to a close. And then we'll do a quarterfinals preview coming up. And then after that, we will do a recap of exciting action of Week 10 of the NFL. So we'll start with the Loyola versus Marist game, which was easily the game of the week in terms of last week. So, Liam, what happened in Loyola versus Marist?
Yeah, no doubt the game of the week. Loyola was really able to flip the script against Marist. Marist came in hot. They started their game off with an 88-yard touchdown drive capped off by Gavin Obracha's 32-yard reception touchdown. But what came up costly in the end was their missed extra point on that play, and that left them down one late in the game. But following it up, Drew McPherson punched one in from the 6-yard line on an indirect snap, following a big 49-yard punt return. Loyola was very, very strong on special teams this week.
They were, and Marist had a great game, especially from Jacob Ritter, their quarterback, who right after that followed up, marched 80 yards down, capped it off with a 32-yard rushing touchdown. On the day, he went 13 for 20 through the air, 172 yards on the ground, getting those feet going, and he was a perfect 8 for 8. 100% pass completion rate, so great job in the air from him.
Yeah, all of that through the first half was great. But then what happened in the second half went downhill for Marist. After a very uneventful third quarter, Loyola was able to punch a touchdown in the fourth and then took the lead with the extra point and then hit a field goal towards the end for Loyola insurance points, and that moved them on in a 24-20 win.
Yeah, and by then it was too late for Marist to do anything. They got all the wind taken out of their sails, and at that point, the two-time state champions, Loyola, looking to make it running back for a three-peat.
No doubt.
They were up and away. But credit to the Marist fans who went all out for their game day. They tailgated before the game and even dressed as leprechauns for their theme.
Yeah, I believe it was the luck of the south side or north side, whatever one Marist is on. They all went all green. That was their theme. It was a great theme to watch. Kid on my hockey team dressed up, nice big suit, little leprechaun. It was a great theme.
Definitely one of the best student sections in the state.
Oh, without a doubt. They're always something to watch for.
Speaking of great student sections, Fenwick, well-known, notorious for their rowdy celebrations, rowdy touchdown celebrations, particularly when their team gets going. They unfortunately lost to DGN in a very close game, 13-10, in a defensive battle that was capped off by a game-winning field goal as time expired by the DGN linebacker Antonio Colizas. He came up with two big, crucial field goals in this game, including a 20-yard field goal to put DGN up 10-0, and then finally that game-winning 28-yard field goal with 4 seconds left. But overall, I just got to say, they have some playmakers on the defensive side of the ball.
I mean, yeah, they do. Let's talk about an aforementioned dog in Jake Gregorio. We talked about him in our last show, may have been 2 shows ago. He's a running back / linebacker, and he rushed for 17 yards and had a 3-yard rush touchdown that opened the scoring. But he also had 3 catches for 17 yards and a bunch of huge defensive tackles. Having a guy like that on your team proves to be dangerous, as they were able to outlast Fenwick by only 3 points.
Yeah, they just got defensive players making plays on both sides of the ball, coming up big. You also had their offensive linebacker and long snapper for that game-winning kick, Weston Wajop, with a fumble recovery, and then, of course, the perfect snap for the field goal, as well as guard and defensive end Aiden Solecki with 3 sacks in the game by himself. And then finally, you had running back Caden Shirelli, who got even some snaps on defense and got an interception, coming up big. Every single turnover in that game was huge when it was that close.
Yeah, and something you like to see from a team coming off of a big playoff win is that they're not satisfied. In a quote from Gregorio, he said, "Obviously, we have to be better and we have to clean up some stuff, but that is a special win. Last year, we were able to make it to the end, which is the championship game, and let's see if we can get all the way to the end again and win it this time." Clearly, they weren't satisfied with that low-scoring win. They know they can be better, and if they can prove to be better, they can be dangerous in the long run for this playoffs.
Yeah, you can tell he's just bitter after their 7A state championship loss to Mount Carmel last season, where they got whooped 35-10, and they clearly want to run it back. And what's good for them, they have a chance at redemption, because the way the brackets are lining up in this 7A state championship bracket right now, they could play Mount Carmel in the state final once again, which is definitely possible.
Speaking of Mount Carmel, let's wrap up their game. The Caravan were able to cruise past St. Charles North in a 48-15 playoff win. And one thing is winning big in the playoffs, but another thing is winning so big that your starters are taken out in a big playoff game. But Jack Elliott was back in business for the first time, being able to rush the ball himself. But through the air, he went 9 for 15 for 140 yards and 3 touchdowns. In his, kind of reunion with running the ball, he rushed 13 times and had 66 yards and 2 touchdowns.
This was just an absolute statement win from Mount Carmel, especially with Jack Elliott finally back. He was limited in pass games, even injured. They had their quarterback, Emmett Dowling, in as their backup, and now that he's back, only 3 things are certain in life, right? Death, taxes, and Jack Elliott taking care of business.
Exactly.
And I think this QB wide receiver duo of Cooper Lehman and Jack Elliott, who we've seen break records in the past in the regular season, as well as upcoming sophomore wide receiver Quinton Burrell, it's dangerous. And I know we said it could be DGN in that potential state matchup with Mount Carmel, but whoever it is, I think Mount Carmel is going to be there because they could definitely go back-to-back and repeat for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And you said Jack Elliott's going to take care of business. But even if he doesn't, he's got a run game that will back him up without a doubt. Daniil Taylor Jr. had 8 carries for 123 yards and a touchdown. Some absurd stats right there. But when you get to their backup running back that ended up finishing off the game, only had 4 carries, but still amassed 62 yards. And Mount Carmel in total recorded 300 yards on the ground.
Wow. They can get it done on both sides.
Both sides.
In the passing game and on the ground. That's dangerous. And speaking of dangerous, Lyons Township having arguably one of their best seasons of all time for football, thrashing Downers Grove South 63-20 in a home victory. Amazing. And it was spurred on by a third quarter dominant display in which they scored 28 unanswered points. But can we talk about Travis Stamm? Are you kidding me?
Oh my gosh, this dude is all over the place. Illinois State commit, 4-year varsity starter, and this is what you get from your 4-year varsity starter. He won Slow Shade Player of the Week, which is not easy.
Well deserved, by the way.
100%.
Yeah, talk about a stat line real quick. 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, including a pick 6. He's the team's leading wide receiver and quarterback, and like you mentioned, he's been a 4-year varsity starter all his 4 years. It's crazy.
Yeah, and not only did he have 3 touchdowns, he had 160 yards. He had 8 receptions, 159 yards, including a 26, a 21, and a 30-yard touchdown for LT. This man is a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, I mean, Mount Carmel have Jack Elliott. LT have the white Travis Hunter, because that's exactly who this kid is. And he bailed out the team on numerous occasions to swing the momentum in LT's favor throughout this game. For example, their QB, Don Pisciotti, in the first quarter, he threw an interception on his first attempted pass to linebacker Matthew Jacobs of DGS. But what does Stamm do? He wins the ball right back for LT, getting an interception at the 4-yard line, denying them of the opening score in the game. Absolutely pivotal.
Yeah, I mean, a pivotal moment which just really flipped the game in general and then flipped his game as he was able to get his second interception at the LT 33, which eventually led to a 67-yard touchdown pass to Mac Long, which is just a crazy way to flip the field. Is a nice interception by Stamm, and then Long goes the distance.
He's making these big plays that the whole team is just able to rally behind, and you can see that time and time again because even the defense, other players are starting to make plays because of it. Tanner Rivera capped off the scoring with their last score of the game, had a 38-yard pick 6 interception, and you could attribute that to just how this whole team, including Stamm, is just making plays, and they're feeding off of each other's energy, and it's a great environment. Another big play that I want to talk about that probably doesn't get mentioned as much because it doesn't appear on the stat line is Travis Stamm hawking down DGS running back Caden Smith on a 73-yard touchdown that would have easily gone to the house if it was any other quarterback. He chased him from the other side of the field. It was like it was DK Metcalf against Buda Baker a few years ago. His speed was something I've never seen before from a white cornerback.
Yeah, it was a great thing. I mean, the second that I saw that clip, the first thing I thought about was DK Metcalf, but maybe even more impressive from coming across the field rather than just straight up and down. But the duality of the Doms comes together in this game where quarterbacks Dominic West and LT quarterback Dom Pisciotti face off, but Dom Pisciotti clearly won this battle, throwing for 327 yards and 5 touchdowns.
Yeah, part of that obviously was Stamm being his wide receiver, probably just lofting it up there and say, who cares? He's down there somewhere. He's probably going to be open. He's going to catch it. But then DGS QB Dominic West did not get as lucky, did not have as much help, and he was putting up Jared Goff numbers from last week in a bad way. He had 4 interceptions in this game. There was 1 fumble as well. Only had 40 passing yards, and 4 of those interceptions were 2 pick 6s. Not great at all.
And obviously, 3 coming from Stom again, which is just an outrageous thing to talk about. But if we're looking at a weakness for LT, it's got to be their special teams. They allowed a 96-yard kickoff return touchdown from Keon Maggot and a scoop and score touchdown from Gavin Powell's on a blocked punt.
Yeah. I mean, you need all 3 to be good. You need your special teams, your defense, and your offense to be showing out in the playoffs. And they have 2 out of the 3 right now, but their special teams is certainly lacking with Keon Maggot and Gavin Powell's both scoring off of those special teams mistakes. Considering that their defense only allowed 36 passing yards for DGS and 124 rushing yards, which is only 160 total yards in total, compared to their offense, which had 475 total yards. It's ridiculous. So they really need to straighten that up if they want to have more success.
Yeah, for sure. If they want to have a lot more success, they got to get past this 10-1 Naperville Central team, which they have this week in the quarterfinals. But talking about success, this is LT's probably their best season that they've ever had. They've gone 11-0 in total games played, 6-0 in conference, and it's their first time winning the West Suburban Silver Conference since 1987.
And we know how competitive this West Suburban Silver Conference is. It's got teams such as DGN, York, Hinsdale Central, who they've been losing to in past years in huge rivalry games. So LT is turning around this season with players such as Travis Stom, but also such as players like Pat Cheney, who is a linebacker that is currently out, but he will be returning soon. And that'll be a problem once he comes back because the defense is already so good. Imagine how better it will be once he returns.
Yeah, I mean, that's just something, that's a scary sight to see when he's back on the field. But now let's talk about our quarterfinals preview. We listed some notable matchups. Our first one has to be Lincoln Way East. They're 11-0 this year against the 10-1 Stevenson.
Yeah, Lincoln Way East just clearly seems to be the best team in Illinois right now. It's not even close, and it's all because they have Jonas Williams at the helm for them. Oregon commit. They've been averaging 44.7 points per game. Insane. Their lowest scoring game, they had 28 points against Naperville Central. But besides that, it's all been 40-plus games. I think one 38-point game. And I try to think maybe they're suffering from DGN syndrome. They just have a Mickey Mouse schedule. They're not playing good teams. But I looked at their schedule, and their strength of schedule is actually quite impressive.
Yeah, they've played some pretty hard teams. But, I mean, in the long run, when you think about it, you have a quarterback like Jonas Williams, arguably the best quarterback in the state at the moment, maybe not even arguably. You see the plays that this guy has been making all season. I think Lincoln Way East could even cruise past the 9-seed Stevenson.
I think this won't even be much of a contest. We know Stevenson is probably a team that you shouldn't be, don't take them lightly. They just laid a whooping on Glenbard East 35-7, a team that RB knows all too well. They got crushed at Glenbard East, but that just shows the levels. But they also beat Warren Township 16-7, and we'll talk about Warren in a little bit as well. But yeah, Lincoln Way East is just on another level. Looking at some of the teams they play in the regular season too, I'd say they're much better than Stevenson. You have Maine South, who they beat in the opening game. Naperville North, who had Jacob Bell as their quarterback. He had one of the better seasons out of all the quarterbacks in the state. And also, they had a 28-7 W versus Naperville Central, who they could potentially play later in the playoffs. And if they already just cruise past them, could only imagine what they'll do in the playoffs.
Yeah, without a doubt. But let's move on to our next game. Lyons Township versus Naperville Central, who we just kind of touched up on a little bit. Exciting quarterback-wide receiver matchup for both of these teams. They've got Piscotty and Stam, and they got Sebastian Hayes and Deshaun Williams. This could be the matchup of the week.
Absolutely. I think Lyons Township probably the favorites right now, especially because they're going to be at home.
Yeah.
But Naperville Central, they're a great team. Sebastian Hayes is clicking right now. He's a St. Francis transfer that missed his sophomore and junior years, but he's back and he's firing on all cylinders because he also has, like you mentioned, Deshaun Williams, who's an Indiana State commit, and he's been going insane as well. They have some really good guys. Their running back, Aiden Clark, has been going off. They also have a Vanderbilt defensive line and Jake Stanish. So this will be a great game, and yeah, I think this will be a blockbuster for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, they're coming off a massive win, 31-28 over Fremd, who honestly I wasn't even sure was that great, but it was a good game to watch. And they have Northwestern quarterback commit Johnny O'Brien, who threw for 464 yards and 4 touchdowns. And something you can compare that to is just the outcome of Piscotty's game last week.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was almost a comeback win for Fremd, actually.
Yeah.
But the fact that Naperville Central were able to fend them off and hold their ground and stick out a win against a really good Fremd team with a Big Ten commit quarterback,
yeah,
it just shows that this team has a lot of potential. They came into the season ranked 17th in the preseason rankings, so teams already knew how good they were going to be, but they've even surpassed those expectations too.
Yeah, for sure. But without a doubt, they took care of business. Williams did put up 92 yards with 9 receptions and a touchdown. And Hayes himself, threw 26 times, had 19 completions for 196 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think Naperville Central does have a chance to take this game, but they're going to need a beautiful game from their top 2 stars.
And then looking at the bracket too, if LT wins against Naperville Central, they could possibly play either York or Warren in the semifinals, and then the winner of that would play either Lincoln Way East or Loyola Academy on the other side of the bracket, which, by the way, I feel like the winner of that semifinal matchup, I know we're already saying Loyola Academy, we're kind of counting out Maine South right now, but let's just theorize right now, right?
Yeah.
If Lincoln Way East plays Loyola Academy, that's the game of the year. That's the game of the year. I feel both of those teams just stack up way better than any of these other teams on the other side of the bracket in LT, Naperville, York, or Warren. So we'll see how that goes, but that'll be a highly anticipated semifinal if it does shake out that way.
Yeah, of course. Obviously, Jonas Williams, he's got a name for himself, but he doesn't want to make a name for himself. He wants to make a name for his school in Lincoln Way East. He wants to take down the 2-time defending state champions in Loyola. So that would be a crazy game to watch if we do get the pleasure of having it.
Yeah, but for right now, let's talk about York versus Warren.
Let's do it. Aaron Stewart. York probably has the better all-around team, but Warren has Aaron Stewart, and that's really all that it came down to in this game. This man is the 16U national champion and has been with the USA wrestling team for multiple occasions and was even named the USA Wrestling Athlete of the Week just this July.
Yeah, just to think, 5'7", 170 pounds. He's probably the best running back in the state. But I think that's his second sport. That's not even the sport he's the best at. It's wrestling, where he's a 5-star nationally ranked recruit. Absolutely insane. He holds offers from Oklahoma State, Illinois, Oklahoma, North Carolina, Iowa State, Princeton. The list goes on. This kid is an absolute athletic specimen.
I mean, talk about athletic specimen. You can't rely on a running back much more than Warren does. I mean, giving the same running back 42 carries in a single game is just outrageous. But then having that running back put up efficient numbers with 42 carries each time he touches the ball, where he had 359 yards and 5 touchdowns.
Yeah, it's honestly a shame that we won't be able to see him at the collegiate level in football, because we know he would shine. He's going to be even better at wrestling, but he's a joy to watch when he's on the ground. And like you said, yeah, against Barrington last week in the second round of the playoffs, he put up 42 carries, 5 touchdowns in that game. I can't even speak about how insane that is, how impressive that is. On the season, he has 2,348 yards, already eclipsed 2,000 yards in less games than they do in the NFL. 32 touchdowns, 7.3 yards per carry. It's unbeatable.
Yeah, I don't know how you can stop this man. He's putting up quarterback numbers on the ground, which is something that rarely, if ever, happens in high school football. But let's talk about York. They have a runner themselves in quarterback Bruno Massel, who took matters into his own hands with 21 carries as a quarterback for 173 yards and 3 touchdowns last week in their 35-17 win versus Oswego. York has always been one of the better teams. I do think this is one of their off years, but they're going to need one of their better games to take down a excruciating Warren team.
Yeah, York will have the home field advantage, which will be key in this game. They come into this 9-2. Warren are 7-4. Like we said, Warren, they did lose a decent amount of games during the season, but you can never count them out with Aaron Stewart. So we'll see. I think I will personally take York in this game because they're better all around, but once Aaron Stewart gets going, there's no stopping him. So you'll never know.
Yeah, I do agree on the York take, but I do think if Aaron Stewart can get his game going, I think there could be a Warren win coming their way.
Possibly. You could be right. And then we'll just run through some of the key 7A quarterfinal matchups as well. You have Batavia versus Downers Grove North. Both teams are 10-1 going into that one, as well as Mount Carmel versus Normal Community. Mount Carmel looking to go back-to-back in state championships, which I think they could definitely do.
Yeah, no doubt. But now let's touch up on the 6A games. We have some information on both of those. We got Cary Grove taking on Belvedere North. Cary Grove is 11-0, looking to take another state championship home, and Belvedere North is 10-1, looking to crush the hopes of Cary Grove. Last week, Cary Grove dismantled Antioch with a 41-8 win in the second round. But at what cost?
Yeah, Cary Grove, they run a very tricky triple option, but like you said, at what cost? They lost their star fullbacker and linebacker in Logan Abrams. He was a key player for this offense and defense, and he's unfortunately going to miss the rest of the season. And that's not good because you want every single player, every single starter in your squad healthy in case you got to play a team such as East St. Louis, who they will probably play in the state finals, because let's be honest, it's really a two-way race between these two teams for another state championship. Cary Grove got the best of East St. Louis last year, but this year, with a player such as Abrams out, it's going to be tough.
Yeah, for sure, it's going to be tough. And arguably, you could say East St. Louis is even better this year, as they are getting in scheduled games with IMG and hardly losing to them.
Yeah, no, I mean, they've been playing top opponents, and they really don't have much of a challenge. They play Glenwood this week, who do have a great record, but within that area that they play in, it's not really a lot of great opponents, so it's really just East St. Louis all by themselves.
Yeah, and one last game we'll touch up on is Geneva versus Lake Forest. Talon Taylor is kind of the star player over there in Geneva. Geneva has averaged 39.4 points per game, which is a stat line you do not see often. Talon Taylor took a kickoff return for a touchdown in his big 42-28 win last week over Burlington Central. Talon Taylor is a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, and I want to correct myself because I said that Cooper Lehman / Quinton Burrell, that was the best QB wide receiver duo with Jack Elliott in the state. I want to take that back. I think it's Anthony Chihino and Talon Taylor. Chihino also went off in this game against Burlington Central, going for 285 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he completed over 75% of his passes. Both guys have just been absolutely massive. Couple that with their running back, Michael Romero, who's been insane on the ground for them. They have 3 key playmakers for this offense, and they come into this game 10-1, better record than Lake Forest, who is currently 9-2, and I believe that they're favored in this game. I see them winning this one, and that'll set up for a great matchup between Cary Grove and Geneva.
Yeah, that could be a matchup that, without a doubt, could be the matchup of the week, besides maybe that Lincoln Way East Loyola game. But definitely, there's some action to look forward to coming up in the 6A, and we'll skim over our last 5A game, which will cap off our playoff recap. It's Rochelle, who's 10-1, versus the reigning state champions, Nazareth, who is 9-2 on the year.
Yeah, this is the only game we really have circled in the 5A bracket. You also have St. Francis still in it, as well as teams such as Morgan Park, Sycamore, and Joliet Catholic, but we really see Nazareth as the runaway champions here. They were last year, and they were much worse last year. They only went 4-5 in the regular season. This year, they're 9-2. Logan Malachuk at the helm, who's been incredible. I think they'll easily take care of Rochelle. Game is at Rochelle, by the way, so maybe that might make a difference. We don't know. Rochelle is 10-1, but in the Chicagoland area, it's just much different football than where you're coming from, Southern Illinois, like Rochelle.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think this could be a good game, but I do think Nazareth will take it away from them. But let's move on to our next segment where we talk about the NFL Players of the Week and Teams of the Week. Starting off, everyone knows it's coming. It's Jamar Chase, who exploded for 55.4 fantasy points, putting up 264 reception yards and 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, and it was just an absolute robbery that he was not voted AFC Player of the Week. Lamar Jackson somehow won it, probably just because they won off of a missed call. Just absolute interference. Joe Burrow roughing the passer. That was a horrible call. But don't take anything away from Jamar Chase's performance. 67-yard touchdown, 70-yard touchdown, and a Sports Center-worthy 4-yard touchdown where he grabbed it over a cornerback. He was ballistic this game.
Yeah, it was just a sight to see. Every time I picked up my phone, it was another Jamar Chase catch, another Jamar Chase touchdown. He just couldn't get off the screen. The screen time was just Jamar Chase, big play after big play, but somehow comes up short in such a high-scoring affair between the Ravens and the Bengals, who is one of, if not the best rivalries in the league that we have.
Yeah, and although it was a missed call on that last play for that 2-point conversion, I still don't know how you don't go to Jamar Chase once again.
Yeah.
They didn't target him. Jamar Chase, in the post-game press conference, said, "I'm always open. You could always find me." And he proved that in this game.
Yeah, honestly, if you do look at the film, he was open. He was the guy you should have thrown to instead of a tight end. I believe it was Mike Gesicki, who only had around 4 catches that game rather than 11 and almost 300 yards. But we'll talk about his partner in crime next, Joe Burrow, who did his own thing on Thursday Night Football. He threw for had 33.7 fantasy points and threw for 34 completions, 428 yards, and 4 pass touchdowns. Obviously, 3 of those going to Jamar Chase, but him and Jamar Chase are clearly the entire Bengals offense.
Yeah, if this Bengals team didn't have a 4-6 losing record, I think Joe Burrow would definitely be in the MVP conversation because he's been putting up MVP numbers all year.
Yeah.
It's just the fact that his defense has been abysmal, and they've been giving him no help. Him and Jamar Chase have just been taking the reins of this offense, like you said, and just running away with it. And I'm really excited for this Bengals and Chargers matchup on Monday Night Football coming up.
The Harbaugh.
Or Sunday Night Football, rather, but it's going to be a high-scoring affair for sure.
Yeah, of course. I mean, Jim Harbaugh, I just, talked over you for a second there, but Jim Harbaugh has been putting together a very impressive Chargers team, one that we haven't seen in the past years, proving that the roster, or the coach, could be bigger than the roster. But it's kind of reversed for the Bengals. The Bengals have the roster, but do they have the coach to bring them there? This should be probably the game of the week, in my opinion, as both of these teams are looking for a statement win.
Yeah, it'll be a great test for Joe Burrow as well. The Chargers actually are the best defensive team in the NFL right now.
Yeah.
They're only letting up, on average, 13 points per game per week, which is the best out of any teams in the NFL. So we'll see how it goes, but I think it will be a high-scoring affair because Justin Herbert is also now starting to sling the rock.
Yeah.
So that'll be great to see. And then now let's shift to the Atlanta Falcons, who Bijan Robinson is putting together himself quite the season.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, coming off of a maybe somewhat disappointing rookie season, Bijan Robinson has clearly picked up the reins and taken hold of the Falcons offense. While you have games where Kirk Cousins may throw for 5 touchdowns, there's no doubt that one of those is going to Bijan, and Bijan's doing his own thing. He had 20 carries, 116 yards, and 2 touchdowns, and put together 3 receptions for 28 yards too.
Yeah, I think he's putting together himself a campaign for the fantasy RB1.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, the numbers he's been putting up in the last 5 weeks have all been around that number of 25 in fantasy. And if he keeps that up, he's going to be the number 1 running back, the number 1 coveted player that you could draft in the first round, probably for next year.
Yeah, for sure. And let's talk about a guy who may slide into a number 1 spot is Marquez Valdes-Scantling. He could slide into that New Orleans Saints wide receiver 1 position after having himself a kind of flashback game, as he put up 25.9 fantasy points on 3 receptions, put up 109 yards, and had himself 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, he had 3 receptions on only 3 targets. The fact that he was able to be this productive with the amount of targets he was thrown makes me think that he's going to be a very volatile player going forward. His production might not be always the best, but sometimes because he's going to be a deep target threat for Derek Carr, he could explode. So you'll never know. He'll be so inconsistent from week to week, but we'll see how it goes. It seems that he's going to be one of the main playmakers in this New Orleans Saints offense, along with Alvin Kamara.
Yeah.
Now that Chris Olave is on IR, and Rashid Shaheed, who's kind of filling the role of right now, is out for the season.
Yeah, for sure. I think Marquez Valdes-Scantling, if he can keep putting up these flashback Green Bay Packers games that Bears fans used to hate seeing, I think he could put himself in a very good position to be the wide receiver 1 in this offense and be a solid flex spot for a fantasy team. But let's move into some honorable mentions for the weeks. Obviously, we didn't want to talk about 2 quarterbacks in 1 week, but Kyler Murray put up MVP kind of stats in their 31-6 win versus the Jets.
Definitely deserves a shout. He's really turned this Cardinals team back around, and we'll talk about them because they are one of our teams of the week. But he can play Clyde all he wants now.
Yeah, he's earned it. I mean, putting up 29.74 fantasy points. He broke the record on the Arizona Cardinals for most completions or consecutive completions as he went 22 for 24, putting up very good numbers and just dismantling the poor Jets defense.
If we can see that connection more consistently between him and Marvin Harrison, this team will be dangerous. And we know they already have Trey McBride, who's been receiving those targets and that production. So, yeah, this team, very underrated. They're 6-4 right now, and they lead the NFC West. So watch out for the Cardinals.
Yeah, the Cardinals are definitely trying to make a name for themselves. We'll skim over the last 2. Calvin Ridley putting himself in a good position for fantasy owners as he's put up some solid last 3 weeks. He put up 25.4 this week in their loss against the Chargers. He did have 2 touchdowns, which may, take some value off of it. But Calvin Ridley's been stepping in hot in that spot.
Yeah, all he needed was for DeAndre Hopkins to leave the Titans and go to the Chiefs for him to really emerge as the number 1 wide receiver. It was in question whether he'd be valuable at all for fantasy owners this year with Will Levis at quarterback, but it finally seems that they're starting to establish a connection as Will Levis gets more experience. So good things for him, especially because he has an easy strength of schedule for the last weeks of the fantasy season coming up.
Yeah, for sure. And lastly, Chuba Hubbard doing his thing this year, puts up 24.9 points. That's just kind of an average Chuba Hubbard game for this year, which has been one of the biggest sleepers in fantasy, probably going into the season, and has had himself a beautiful campaign. But like we talked about, we'll go back to the Arizona Cardinals game, who flew past the Jets in their 31-6 win. And we already talked about Kyler Murray, but they combined for 147 yards on the ground.
Yeah, so that's 2 dominant wins back-to-back for the Cardinals, 31-6 this week, and then in Week 9 they had a 29-9 win, unfortunately for us Bears fans who are in complete misery. But regardless, yeah, the Cardinals looking great. It's really incredible to see how they turned their whole campaign around after last year being one of the worst teams in the NFL, being projected to be one of the worst teams, but with the reemergence of Kyler Murray coming back, because last year it was all backups, including, remember that one glory run by Josh Dobbs, but nonetheless, yeah, the Cardinals are back, and looking at their schedule, they have a lot of NFC West opponents coming up, so that will be pivotal in their playoff hopes if they can win those games. Then they also have some easy games like the Panthers and the Patriots, so they could definitely keep stacking up some more wins.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about a team that's back, but hardly left is the Pittsburgh Steelers. Last year they put up a barely above 500 schedule so Mike Tomlin could keep his streak going, but they just took down one of the hottest teams in the NFL in the Washington Commanders.
Yeah, this was definitely one of the most anticipated games of Week 10, probably the 2 hottest teams of the whole NFL season going into this week. And it was really a battle between the 2 Coach of the Year candidates, in Dan Quinn and Mike Tomlin. And Tomlin came out on top, showing his wisdom with that decision to start Russell Wilson after a 4-2 start with Justin Fields in the opening weeks.
Yeah, and talk about wisdom. Russell Wilson goes in there, says he'll take the 4th down instead of punting, giving the Commanders a chance, and causes the defense to go off sides. That's just a veteran move from Russell Wilson, who's put up a very good campaign coming back from what some say a poor season out in Denver. I think the Steelers could make a run this year.
Yeah, Russell Wilson is 3-0 in his first 3 starts since that horrible season with the Broncos last year where it was just a bad environment for him with Sean Payton hating on him every single week. So yeah, I'm really liking the Steelers, and they will have a really tough matchup against the Ravens coming up this Sunday, which is something to look out for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And last game we'll recap is the Lions versus the Texans, where the Lions completely flipped the script after an atrocious first half where Jared Goff threw for 4 interceptions in the first half and then eventually one later in the second half.
Yeah, just a horrible game by Jared Goff, like you mentioned, but still the Lions somehow found a way, which is what teams that are 8-1 do. They find a way to win. Just absolutely insane. I think we can all agree that the Lions are probably the best, most talented team in the NFL right now.
Mm-hmm. No doubt. I think they completely shut down Joe Mixon, who has been the NFL's probably hottest running back at the moment, who was struggling to break 50 yards in this game. He could barely get over 2 yards a carry. And let's put that in perspective. They just traded for Zadarius Smith, who did not play in this game, but they were also out their top man in Aiden Hutchinson.
Yeah, they have the best run defense in the NFL, and the fact that they're adding Zadarius Smith to that's going to be dangerous. They're clearly pushing for a Super Bowl, and I think they could definitely well reach that goal, especially because the NFC definitely a lot more easier than the AFC at the moment with teams such as the Bills, Texans, Ravens, and Chiefs all in the AFC. And right now, while the records may not say so, I believe that the Lions are the best team in the NFL.
I always say this, but I do agree. This Lions team has been very good. They've been putting on a show, and I honestly hope they go so far and Ben Johnson makes the smart decision to come to the Bears, or that's if we even fire Eberflus.
Yeah, that's probably not likely, but
yeah.
When you have owners that are 97 years old and treat the organization like a book club instead of an actual NFL team, that's what's going to happen. Poor roster moves and decisions from the higher-ups. So, unfortunately, with that devastating conclusion, that's how we'll end this podcast episode. Stay tuned for us in the coming weeks where we'll talk about the end of the high school football season as it draws to a close. Thank you.